Welcome everyone to this webinar entitled Why Competency Management Should Be Your Top Priority. So listen, thanks for joining us today. My name is Peter Banks. I am the founder and MD of the HR Director publication. We are a strategic resource for senior HR and people leaders in print, person and online. Delighted today to partner with Sympa, who provide fully customizable HR software that lets you focus on your people and smart decision making. Let me do a little brief intro to give you a little framework here. So you're probably aware that competency management is important for identifying and optimizing competencies required for your organization to reach its goals. But do you know, I guess, how it helps your people to enjoy their work, stay at your company, and impact on your competitive edge? So these are all key things we're going to look at. Today, we're going to sort of have a closer look at the competency management processes, the way in which a company inspires people to develop, why we shouldn't forget the importance of personal growth, especially in this hybrid new norm that many people have now. So listen, let's introduce our panelists today. So welcome Toni Turunen, who is the Customer Onboarding Manager at Sympa. So hi, Toni.
Hi, and thank you very much for the brief intro. Very happy to be here today.
Good, thanks for your time. So Toni, I think a good place to start is just to give us a little bit more information about you, your role and your organization, so everyone to get to know a little bit more about you.
Absolutely. So Toni is my name, and that tricky surname would be Turunen. Good luck for everyone who's trying to pronounce that correctly. I manage our implementation teams in the UK and Germany, and Sympa, as you mentioned, is a fully customizable HR solution, and we aim to let you focus on your people. Today, we are trusted by over 1,000 organizations around the world, and we're proud to be the fastest growing HR solution provider in the Nordics. So we started off in the Nordics, and now we have started to take over the UK and Germany as well. And my role really is to make sure that our implementations team have everything they need when we are implementing Sympa for our new clients, when we take their HR processes and transfer those to the digital age, either by converting their existing processes into a cloud platform or helping our clients to maybe introduce some new HR processes and maybe smooth the way of the HR a bit. And we really try to also bring some Nordic flair into the HR processes in our new markets such as UK and Germany. So my background is in HR, by the way. I did work in HR before, but I really found the software side to be close to my heart. So I wanted to jump on the other side of the table, so to say. So I used to work in the kind of roles where my clients today work. So it's very rewarding to be able to help them in the challenges they face in their daily lives, since I can say that I have been there and done that.
Lovely. Thanks, Toni. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important once you've been in that kind of both sides of the fence, as you say. So, well, listen, let's start off with a first poll. Now we know a bit more about Toni. So please have a go at this one. It just gives us an idea of what sort of audience we've got here today. So the question will pop up on your screen now. So, and it is, do you have a competency management strategy in place? A, yes, B, no, or C, it's a work in progress. So if you could just give your answers to that one. I mean, Toni, you're obviously dealing with a lot of different clients, and I guess, so what's your prediction we're going to get there then? What are you thinking?
Well, having worked with tens and tens of Sympa implementations and being able to see a lot of different organizations and their HR processes, I'd say it's always work in progress. So even the smallest organizations with very, let's say, immature HR have paid some attention to this area, but often haven't maybe had the time to focus on this area when the daily HR routine tasks are maybe in the way and using the resources of the HR and people teams. So work in progress, always and forever.
Well. You win your first prize, Toni. You're spot on. So 50% work in progress at the moment, 30% no, 20% yes. So yeah, you're absolutely right. So that's an interesting starting point, I think, for us. And again, probably not much for you to say about that, but just exactly as you thought. So it's good timing here, I think. Okay,
Absolutely.
well, let's look at our first question. And I think this is just an interesting one at the start to explore, I guess your definition of competency management, and I guess the reasons why I think you feel quite strongly it should be an ongoing process as well. So yeah, let's hear what you think there.
Absolutely. So, of course, competency management, it is important for identifying and optimizing the competencies required for your organization to reach its goals, right? And like you mentioned, it really contributes to people enjoying their work, your retention rates, and impacts on your competitive edge. And it really, the way we see it at Sympa, comes down to ensuring you have the right people with the right skills for any given job, right? And this is why you should have a continuous process in place to, first of all, track the skills and competencies a person has developed, and then comparing these against the evolving needs of your organization. And since the needs are always evolving, this needs to be a continuous process, since if you map the required skills your organization needs today, it's very likely that when within a year, 3-5 years, this is not the relevant skill set anymore. So I'd say as an outcome, when you allow the right talent to be matched with the right role, and therefore you get the positive implications like retaining your talent and really ensuring all the activities in your organizations are carried out by skilled people. And if these competency gaps grow too big, it usually has well-being and, of course, financial implications. And of course, in an ideal world, your organization would have all the skills you need. But in reality, that is never the case. You will always have these gaps. And traditionally, these are closed with some on-the-job training, but also with other methods like mentoring and coaching, and of course, recruiting externally as well. So there are many aspects to it. Your employees as well as your organization evolves, and therefore it needs to be a continuous process. It's not a one-off task.
Yeah, okay. And so it's very much about the employee in terms of their own performance, and then also, basically sort of develop and optimize the skills for the organization as well, this sort of in terms of the strategy. So your point about how it kind of needs to be an ongoing process is because that's constantly changing. Yeah, and I guess we're through a time of immense change at the moment in business.
Absolutely. And while your organization's needs evolve, also your employees' needs and career aspirations evolve. So it needs to be a dialogue, and hopefully also quite people-centric, and it's driven from your goals in your organization, but it needs to be an ongoing process together with your employees individually.
Okay. And so let's think about how we I think you talk about the ins and outs. So talk about the ins and outs of a competency management process. So yeah, give us where you're going with that. Exactly, explain to everyone.
Yeah, it is a mouthful, isn't it? Well, of course, I'm gonna keep it on a rather high level, and there's of course a huge amount of different competency management processes and frameworks. Oftentimes, when we implement Sympa for our new clients, they of course ask for our guidance or inputs in how should they start with their competency management process. And I would say that you start by defining these strategic starting points and your core processes and the goals of this competency management process. What are the competencies we need now? But of course, looking into the future, what are the competencies we expect to be needing in a 5 years time? Once you have established this, you are then ready to assess the existing skills of your people on an individual level. And this usually is made tremendously easier when you have an HR system in place that allows such personal assessments. Now you have identified your goals and the skills your people have. Now we can look at the gaps. What is the current skill level compared to the strategy and goals? And this should usually translate to a common goal where you identify the steps you need to take to reach this goal on an individual level with each employee. This can of course be translated into team or department specific needs or requirements, but it always comes down to the individual, and usually done by creating more traditional development plans, managing career paths, and narrowing the skill gaps with training. And where you cannot still reach the desired skills with these actions, recruitment usually comes into play as well. And essentially then you repeat. So you go back to evaluating your company's needs in the changing business environment where you're in, and again translate that into individual development plans, career plans, etc. And I of course can make this sound really simple. Rarely it is so clear-cut in reality. The process of course depends on the size of the organization, but even so, the process should always be linked to your organization's needs and translated into what these needs mean in practice for an individual employee. What does our company's needs mean for me personally as an individual contributor in our organization?
Yeah, okay, so this is this planning is really important. I think I'm getting loud and clear from you again, and I guess we're in this time of, yeah, as we'll come on to, skills gap, you know, upskilling, you know, and so, you know, yeah, you're really kind of looking at where the company is driving for, what it's lacking, what it needs, etc. Yeah, okay.
And I have seen that oftentimes companies are very good in the skill assessment. It's very easy to ask your employees what do you know and how well, but what to actually do with this information and where to go with this information in hand. And that's where the strategy that you have established comes into play, of course. So it's important to also make a plan on where do we want to be, not only to know what are the skills that we have in our organization.
Yeah, I think we're getting much better at being forward thinking, which is good. So, okay. Now, again, like I said, if there's any questions as we're going along, we'll ask them as we go. So please do, you know, send them in on the Q&A, and we'll take a look at them. So, okay, so got a kind of a framework here in terms of how the understanding and how we're going forward. So let's look at a second poll here, which will sort of lead us on to further questions here. So so this is going to pop up on your screen again now, so if you have a go at this one. So why do you feel what do you feel are the key components of a competency management strategy? So is it A, prioritizing the competencies needed? Is it B, assessing the existing skills? Is it C, identifying gaps through skill mapping? Is it D, identifying steps towards a common goal? Or E, planning recruitment? So quite a few there, but just pick obviously the most relevant there for you. And we'll kind of feed that back again. Toni, I will come to you just to see where you think this is going to land out there. So what are you thinking?
So again, having seen quite a wide range of different kind of organizations while working with Sympa, I've seen companies are quite good in assessing the existing skills and identifying the gaps, but where to go with this information is then the question mark. So I'm gonna guess either B or C is gonna be somewhere in the top, since that's usually where organizations tend to start with assessing the existing skills, even though the strategy is not yet there.
Okay.
But I'm keen to see if there are other kind of answers as well.
I think, well, again, I think you're spot on, really. So so C, yeah, identifying gaps through skills mapping 50%, and the next in line is prioritizing the competencies needed at 25%, and then we're down to sort of 15% on the identifying steps towards common goals, and then 10% assessing. Yeah, so yeah, I think again we're coming back to this skill. Yeah, skills is obviously quite absolutely imperative at the moment. I think this is clearly showing through. Yeah, any thoughts on just those responses there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure in this case, the organization should then think about, we have the skill gaps identified. So what does this mean for an individual employee? Because it's often the competency management really just stays as a high level HR-driven jargon that is not taken into reality in the employee's daily life. So really pay attention to how this translates to the individual contributor in your organization. What does the skill gap mean, and how are we going to close this gap?
Okay, brilliant. Right, so let's go now in terms of benefits. So obviously, what we're trying to do is understand, what's in it for kind of everyone here. So how does competency management benefit your company, and what are the key advantages that you're seeing? And I don't know, again, not whether there's any sort of examples or case studies, sort of thing you could share would be useful.
That is a good question, and oftentimes, if you want to put effort into your competency management processes, you probably need to justify you using your time on this. So you really need to be able to highlight the benefits to be able to use your time to this. Some of the benefits we already mentioned before. Competency management generally allows you to have the right people with the right skills in the right jobs, usually has a positive impact on employee well-being and retention rates, but it also helps you in your resource management. Sooner or later, an employee will leave your organization, either by the latest when they retire, right? And when this happens, with a competency management process in place, you will know exactly what you need to look for in a new candidate. Especially in larger organizations where the recruitment might be a separate function, not carried out by the line managers or even, or it's rather a separate units, it is important for you to have a clarity of the talent that you should be looking for, so that you don't just hire anyone without the right skill sets. And typically, such processes often brings positivity to your workplace culture. Your people, of course, are more happy and content in their jobs when they have the right skills needed and they feel like they can contribute. Has an effect on your company culture. Generally, this supports both individual and peer-to-peer learning and encourages a supportive work environment, really. So it has financial, but also other types of implications in your organization, and see why it wouldn't bring tremendous benefits for organizations to have such a process in place.
What about equally on the leadership side? I mean, I just thrown that one in slightly there, but is there, what sort of gains are you seeing, there? How can that be impactful?
Well, two aspects to this, really. When you have a process in place to identify the required skills, it of course gives leaders the visibility to their teams and where do they need to pay attention to when they are doing resource planning. But also when you think about leadership should be also in the core of your competency management process, in terms of, do our leaders have the right skills to be leading people? And this should be one key element to the competency management process, to make sure that our leaders are fit and equipped to lead their teams themselves, because your leaders will need tools and support in being good managers and good leaders to the staff.
Okay, no, that's useful to know. Okay, no questions as yet. Come on, I'm looking for some questions. We are, aren't we, Tony? Come on, so please send them in. Now, listen, we're in a time, as we know, through the last 3 years that we've been through, where tech has played such a huge part, a huge enabler, as we know. So let's kind of discuss more around the tech side. Obviously, how you can, your HR systems, how can they help with competency management? So what are you using? How are you using this software, this tech?
Well, I'm of course a bit biased what comes to this question, coming from a software house and my personal interest being in the HR software. But in general, HR systems are of course great for gathering all kinds of information regarding your staff, and it gives you great visibility in your people, allows you to identify some trends, but especially on the data you need to build this competency management strategy. With the help of a HR software, you can, for example, simply visualize training and competency data, for example, with dashboards. This usually makes it a lot more interesting, especially for management, who you need to convince to spend time and money on this process. But of course, it helps you to identify these knowledge gaps, and is there to find out if there's any potential need for in-house training projects or future recruitments to a specific position. But really, to kind of boil it down, I would say there are 3 elements to this, and the HR systems generally allow you to combine the competency management data with other HR data. This usually gives you insight on trends and helps build an overview on the needed skills and competencies. It might help you to add and track attendees in these internal trainings you're organizing, and also from a legal or a legislative perspective, allows you to keep track of any expiring certifications or training needs that you need to be tracking from a legal point of view. And in larger organizations, having access to internal CVs, for example, might help you to screen out any potential candidates before you're opening up external recruitment. So a lot of good things coming from the tech side. And the most common tech HR system in the world always is Excel. Excel is a loved and I'm sure equally hated tool by HR leaders. And while it allows you to kind of juggle all this data with the help of Excel, it is quite difficult to really give insightful data to management or input to your process development if you don't have these kind of systems in place.
Yeah, I think it's a really valid point. The amount of people I speak to, and Excel is still used. I mean, an incredible bit of software, really. But you know, a lot of these this new tech is a lot more intuitive, isn't it? And yeah, Tony, we have a question, which is great. So that's terrific. So this one is: how do you go about developing the competency management program for different levels in the organization?
Well, I think this comes from the skills and the goals that you identify that your organization has. So let's say you have the common goals for everyone to reach in your organization, and the common kind of steps for everyone. Every single individual employee should have some sort of a common framework in their competency management process as an individual contributor in your organization. Then there might be different levels to it. If someone is this might be related to the organizational hierarchy. If someone is a line manager, a business unit leader, even down to the C-level, what are the specific goals that these contributors will help us to reach and the skills related to that? But it also might be horizontal. Different positions in different business units across your organizations might contribute to different types of areas in your business, of course. So there is the common framework for everyone. This is what we all should be working towards. And then to each direction, horizontally, vertically, these are the different levels that we then apply on top of that general framework. Really, how I would see at least would be a good starting point to go about the different leveling the competence management programs. Most commonly, the most typical one would be: what happens if I become a manager? What are the skills in addition to the individual contributor that are needed if someone is a manager? And then this can of course be duplicated into other levels as well.
I mean, it seems very much. Hopefully that's answered your question, but please, if we've not, just send something else through. Yeah, it just seems to be, as you say, giving people the skills depending on what their level is, and putting that framework around them, really. So, okay. So another area, listen, we talked about skills already quite a lot, and we've even, talents come into it, which is again another very hot topic in this sort of very tight labour market. So retention equally is something that stood out to me, I guess. So, how can competency management again help you retain your people? Because this is quite key, isn't it, at the moment?
Absolutely. So I think I mentioned this area a bit previously already, but typically overlooking this competency management tends to have a negative effect on both the well-being of the employee and the finances of the company. And while organizations often acknowledge the benefits of competency management, the priority tends to be low. This typically is because there is so much other stuff on the daily HR grind that you just need to get through, and you just don't have time for the competency management bits. But with proper competency management processes, you, for example, are able to avoid failed recruitments, which often are quite costly if you haven't identified the required skill sets for your new hires, as well as your internal knowledge won't go to waste if and when these competencies and skills evolve. So there are kind of two aspects to it. If you as an employee don't feel like you have the right skills to work in a role where you are, might of course lead to someone leaving the organization. But also, if I personally have acquired some new skills that I would like to use in my job, but I currently cannot, this might lead to someone looking for opportunities outside of the organization. So without the proper competency management, I would say that people's skills just can be overlooked and the development may then suffer, to summarize.
Yeah, and I think this personal development is very key, isn't it? Especially, with new, there's kind of younger cohorts coming through. I think there's a real self-development. So I think that kind of, in terms of the business looking at them and helping to develop them, then that's really key, and that's going to retain, isn't it? Simple as that.
Absolutely. And even when you have recruited, for example, the right candidate to a given role, and they have all the skills you need for them to succeed in a role within your organization, these candidates never join your organization as an empty book. They always have all this pre-existing knowledge, skills, and experiences, and there might be so much for you and their peers to learn from that experience. So that's when, for example, peer-to-peer learning might come into play, that you might, of course, want to take advantage of your new employees' existing skills, even though it might not directly be needed in their current role, but it's just to look into, is there anything they can share to their peers as a kind of pair of fresh set of eyes in your organization who is completely new to all of your current processes and ways of working.
Okay, thank you. Again, just keep those questions rolling in. Again, if we're not covering anything you would like us to ask, so that's really useful. Okay, well, let's move on to I think this is our final poll actually. So this one should pop up again on your screen. This is a pretty simple one, but is your strategy efficient or in need of improvement in terms of competency management? So varying degrees here. So A, not at all efficient, B, not very efficient, C, efficient, middle ground, and D, very efficient, or E, completely efficient. So we'll get a flavor here of how efficient it is. So Tony, go on then. What are you going to go with? You right, 2 out of 3 so far.
Well, if there are people who say their processes, or sorry, their strategy is completely efficient, then I'll have to give them a call to say what kind of magic they have done to achieve this. I mean, I'm sure you are never fully satisfied with your strategy. I mean, there should always be things to improve, but I would say it's probably going to be somewhere in the mids. I'm going to go somewhere in the mids with this one. I hope everyone has a sufficient strategy in place, but understand that there are things that we could do better. I'm really happy if someone has a completely efficient strategy that needs no improvements at all. That is good for you.
Well, there's no one in that place at the moment. So yeah, I mean, it is pretty much 58% not very efficient, which is our highest there. 26% efficient and 16% not at all efficient. So Yeah, obviously, I mean, this is what things like these webinars are there for. You're developing, fine tuning, aren't you? You know, in terms of our strategies and what we're doing with these kind of all areas across kind of HR and people management. So, you know, and we got to trial and test, and you know, so this is exactly, you know, what we're doing here. It's just sort of creating more for the strategy. So, okay,
Exactly.
so a surprise there? Well, not really. I think you were sort of on the right lines, weren't you? Really?
Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, like you mentioned, if someone had a perfectly efficient strategy in place, they probably wouldn't be seeking out for webinars on the topic. So no surprises there, I assume.
Again, that might lead some questions if you've got anything there. So culture, let's move on to culture. You know, culture, you know, very important part for all organizations. So let's talk about how an open competency management conversation, you know, how does that reflect an open culture, or does it, you know?
Well, I think today a lot of organizations value these self-learning individuals who are self-driven and, you know, take initiative. But I think it's too much pressure to ask an individual employee to know your company's needs and then train themselves accordingly. So you really need to nurture a workplace culture that doesn't support this silence, but rather encourages your managers and their team members to have open conversations on what does the organization expect from the individual person's skill sets, and vice versa. What do I as an employee expect to be receiving from the organization from a perspective of my competency management? And really, also your managers need to have a culture where they have the knowledge sets and the support and the skills and the systems to support their team members' competency management. Since it is not just a process that you draft in the kind of top levels of the organization and then expect everyone to work accordingly, but the culture needs to be open and transparent. This is what we need, and this is the tool set for a manager to then allow their team members to really acquire the skills that they need in their future roles where they aspire to be, and also in the role where they are currently working in.
And I guess for the organization, you know, there's a piece here about strengthening and sort of, you know, the differences, the competencies. They kind of bring this, I guess, the differences to their competition, for example. So you know, I guess it can help with that.
Of course, you might see. Well, this is one example of this. For example, attracting talent. You can see a lot of job ads today say that you have an X £1,000 a year to contribute to your personal learning if you join our organization, and that is of course one aspect of it, but that still always arises from the individual, and they have to be kind of the active party in this case. So this competency management discussion, for example, it should not only include your expectations towards the individual person in your organization, but also their future aspirations. And when your employees understand that they have a future within your organization in their current role, if that is where they aspire to be, or progressing somewhere horizontally or vertically in your organization, then they know that they have the possibility and means to do so, and clear kind of overview on the steps to be taken if you want to progress in your career by acquiring new skills.
Another question in, Tony. So how can competency frameworks support with ED and I in organizations? So a very, very key question at the moment, actually.
Well, diversity and inclusion related topics are often something that go hand in hand with your competency management process, since it is very often already proved that diverse teams produce better results when people come in from, let's say, outside of the box and give their insight. This often leads to better results. So for example, in recruitment, when you're acquiring these skills that you need, I mentioned that oftentimes companies overlook the fact that when a new person joins your organization, they have all of this existing knowledge that they might not need in this particular role, but should be or could be then brought into the organization in means of peer-to-peer learning. So when your D&I strategy contributes to the competency management processes, you are then able to kind of take the diverse knowledge of your hopefully diverse workforce and spread that across the organization, maybe allow people to broaden their horizons a little bit.
Good. Again, hopefully we've answered that one. If you'd like any more, just again drop another quick question on there. But no, that's good. And again, well, DE and it's such a massive area at the moment, really important for attraction, retention, and I think if it's absolutely got to be part of this whole framework here we're talking about. Okay. So obviously, moving on really, I guess, and this is kind of in tune with where we are at the moment. We're in this sort of time of the hybrid era. And I think obviously, and I think sometimes that's why perhaps some of the questions on the polls, the answers are kind of where they are. You know, we're trying to work, we're all trying to work out what the new norm is, or the new normal, whatever we want to call it. So just how do you plan competency management in this new hybrid era when there's so many kind of unknowns at the moment?
Well, of course, this depends a lot. The type of organization you are working in plays a big role in this. The younger generation probably does not see the hybrid working as the new normal. It's just the normal kind of, you know, that's just how it's been for them. Whereas other types of an organization have seen a massive change in the ways of their working. So yeah, to some extent, this hybrid world has complicated how, for example, trainings and individual development is handled. And therefore, many companies then need to review the tools they use to, for example, identify the trainings that work in a hybrid setting. So let's say if your very simplified example is if you had performance dialogues that were done using pen and paper and now your workforce is remote, that of course does not work. So typically, for example, bringing these processes to cloud simply helps because it doesn't tie you into any specific time or place. And of course, the competency management planning can help since it really supports quicker decision making when you have all of this data available. And when you have a clear plan and active processes, this tends to prevent the chaos rising from not clear competency management or not existing competency management processes. And I think, especially with the help of tech, it is easier to let your people know what exactly their employer expects from them. From my point of view, working with HR tech, of course.
Yeah. And I think another part of this is obviously there are different types of work, you know, your workforce. So, you know, and down to things like deskless workers, for example. So I think, yeah, it's kind of making sure that there's software and tech can kind of aid, isn't it, in terms of these frameworks that you're putting in place?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we're nearly coming to the end. We're going to be rapid at the moment, but I'd really love if we got any more questions from you, just to see if there's anything we've not covered that you really wanted to know today. It's a great opportunity to send in a question for Toni. So please do ask them. I think while we're just seeing if anything does come in. I mean, Toni, I think just that's been really useful today. But I think, oh, actually, wonderful. We've got someone coming in with something here. Right. So if am I correct to assume that each year following the approved business strategy, or as and when the business strategy is reviewed, the exercise of checking the competency required should be done? So I guess, yeah, that's trying to say, so you approve the business strategy and you review it, and then you're checking against the competency required each and every year. Is that, I think that's what you're trying to say there.
Exactly, and this is why it is important for decision makers who work with the competency management process to be able to tie this in with the company's business strategy and really make it clear to management, for example, why it is important for you to review the skills whenever your business strategy is being updated, since an update in your business strategy means that your employees will now need to have different types of skills in different types of roles to achieve the goals of this new strategy. So it is again not a one-time task that you carry out, since can't think of too many businesses where the required skills never change, especially if their business environment changes.
So typically with that then, Tony, would you, for a client, would you put that in place so there'd be an annual review, or a how would you, or is it dependent on you know the organization? What sort of things would you do?
Yeah, this could, for example, be done whenever you are reviewing the goals for the next year, the strategic goals for the next years. And of course, year is it's a bit difficult to work within a time frame of a year. So of course, hopefully your organization has longer term aspirations, since if you say this is what we need next year and you have no skills whatsoever to achieve that, it's a bit difficult to kind of acquire those skills and execute tasks with those acquired skills within the time frame of a year. So hopefully this would be tied to something more long term, like 5 years. What are the business objectives for the next 5 years, and how does this translate into the competencies we need in our organization?
I mean, and some of the challenges are that we've all facing at the moment is this agility piece, you know. So I guess that becomes much more, you know, a bit more difficult, because the long-term plans aren't quite, you know, as they were. It's much shorter time frame. So I suppose that's just you know, that will just be a quicker review, and everyone's kind of doing annual checks, 6 monthly checks, and that sort of thing. So and that process of sort of, it's just a case of assessing, looking at what you've achieved, how it's changed, and tweaking the plan.
Exactly. It's not like you need to bin everything you've built so far. It's really about tweaking, and it doesn't mean everyone's competency profile should be renewed, but it's really adding something in, increasing the importance of something else, while some other item gets less important, and kind of reacting to those little kind of changes.
Brilliant. Hopefully we answered that one for you. Again, any other questions, please send them in now. And then just really, I suppose, while we're waiting to see if there's any more questions, Tony, probably a sum up maybe from you would be quite useful. So just some top tips, I guess, on really how to create a successful competency management strategy would be great.
Well, I actually, kind of wanted to mention the diversity and inclusion part. I already spoke about that a bit. So, but just to kind of recap, that diversity and inclusion plays an important role in your competency management strategy, since it really has been proven that diverse teams produce greater results. And of course, then you have the software, which gives you capabilities to carry out meaningful activities around competency management, but also going back to the diversity and inclusion, with the help of a software, you are able to combine data from the ED&I as well as the competency management and see what are the trends there, and how does the data around the diversity and inclusion play with the competency management processes you have in place. And like today, I've been mostly talking about an individual skill set. So what are the skills of an individual? You can of course look beyond this, and also once your processes are more well established, you can start looking at team specific skill gaps, or even business units wide. So of course it starts from the individual, but together we create a bigger entity, of course, and our skill gaps or different skill levels might balance each other out in well functioning teams.
Okay. And I guess the negativity of not doing this, so what sort of things are going to fall down if this competency management process is not put in place? And just quickly.
Yeah, well, I think if you overlook this, of course, there is the well-being and satisfaction bit that I said and spoke about earlier, that typically organizations where competency management is in the highlight tend to have more satisfied employees. But I would ask myself, how can we meet the business objectives if we haven't kind of laid down to what kind of skills these business objectives translates to, and do we have the required skills in our organizations to then fulfill these objectives if we don't know what our employees are skillful in?
I mean, it's at the moment it's a fantastic place to start, isn't it? In terms of what skill sets do you have, what are you missing?
Exactly.
Yes. Make sure everyone in their roles can do exactly what they need to do, so they're that's the word, competent in what they need to do. So I think it's a great time to be doing this. Absolutely.
And it can start from you can start with the basics, right? It doesn't mean that you have to start a huge project in your organization to revamp the competency management process or start reaching to the stars. You can really just make simple assumptions on how do the objectives translate into skills, and do we have those, and to what extent. It doesn't always, you don't have to always start so grand. You can start with something small and then slowly kind of build the processes once you have the time and capabilities to do so.
That's good advice, I think. Okay, if there's no more questions, I will just sort of sum up, but please, if there is any more questions, do send them in, and we will, if we can't do them now, we'll do them afterwards, so please do. So, well, listen, I think we're there. So, I hope we've kind of provided some sort of key learning, insight, best practice and methodology in terms of how you can build your own competency management strategy and obviously, develop it. Thank you, Toni, for your excellent insights and knowledge, and also Sympa for partnering with us. We do record this, so there will be a recording. We'll edit it quickly and get it back to you so you can revisit and share with your colleagues. And really thank you all for watching and taking part, and I hope you join us for another webinar in the near future. So thanks, Toni, thanks everyone, and bye for now.
Thank you very much for your time. Cheers.